Good morning. I'm Paulo Sotero from the Brazil Institute at the Wilson Center. We are very happy to welcome this afternoon in Washington Minister Luís Roberto Barroso from the Supreme Court of Brazil, currently president of the Superior Electoral Tribunal. Joining him is the president of the Brazil Institute Advisory Board, former ambassador to Brazil, Tom Shannon, also a former deputy secretary of state, now in the private sector. Brazil and the United States, both continental-sized democracies, holding national elections in Brazil and the United States, holding national elections takes a lot of planning and management. And COVID-19 has only brought new challenges to this effort in Brazil. But unlike the United States, where more than 3,000 counties are each responsible for their own electoral process, the supervision and management of elections in Brazil falls largely on the Superior Electoral Court, the highest body of electoral justice in Brazil. In coordination with the regional electoral courts, the TSE has been tasked with protecting poll workers and voters alike in more than 5,500 cities across Brazil during the municipal elections that will take place next, first phase, later this month, second round, at the end of the month. We are honored, as I mentioned in the beginning, to have the president of TSE, Minister Luís Roberto Barroso, and our co-chair of the Brazil Institute Advisory Board, Ambassador Thomas Shannon. Talking about preparation, I would like to mention that one of the private companies that helped the TSE in this effort to prepare elections in time of COVID-19 is a member of the Brazil Institute United Health Group. They provided, I believe, at least 1 million masks to the TSE, to the Electoral Tribunal, who is distributing them, I believe, mostly to electoral sections in the state of Minas Gerais. My role here today is just to introduce this discussion, and I would like to invite then Ambassador Tom Shannon to start the conversation. Tom, the floor is yours. Hello.
Tom, I think your mute still on.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Paulo. It's a real pleasure to be here today. A real pleasure to be with Mr. Barroso. Sir, it's Gabriel Garcia Marquez wrote a very famous book, Love in the Time of Cholera. I believe you could write an equally interesting book called Elections in the Time of COVID. And that's what we're really here to talk about today. But I think I'll start by noting that you're here on a mission. I understand correctly, you're here with the OAS, attending our elections, and that you and your colleagues in this election mission are going to have an opportunity to see the voting as it unfolds, see the counting as it happens, and then we'll be issuing a report regarding this vote. This is a momentous vote here in the United States, and I think lays an interesting groundwork for you as you head back to Brazil and look towards the municipal elections that Paulo noted will be taking place in a very short period of time. So if you don't mind, I was wondering if we could start our conversation by getting your impressions so far of what you've seen here in Washington, what you anticipate tomorrow, and then we can talk a bit about how our two great democracies, the largest democracies in the Western Hemisphere, address voting.
Thank you, ambassadors. It's a great pleasure to be here. I thank Paulo Sotero and the Brazil Institute for the invitation. I'm happy to be here with good friends and to meet the Ambassador Tom Shannon. Unfortunately, not in person, but hopefully we'll be able to do that soon. So yeah, I'm here basically for two reasons, Ambassador. One of them is to meet with the OAS, the Organization of the American States. They are going to be observers in our elections in Brazil to take place on November the 15th. And we are developing this practice of having foreign independent or international independent observers. They were there in 2018. And we find this an important measure to give transparency to our elections and to make it visible internationally. And of course, I was also invited by the Maryland Electoral Board to be an observer, which is a great experience. I've been watching things, Ambassador, and what I see is that elections here are basically as polarized as they were in Brazil in 2018. I think the world is very polarized, to be true. What I see is that there is some degree of polarization all over history. Like from the beginning of the American Republic, you had Republicans and Federalists, or in France, you had at the National Assembly, you had the right and the left. We both are members of the generation that saw the polarization between capitalism and free market and socialism and planned economies. So polarization it's nothing new. What I think it's new and we're dealing with this time in the elections are one, the pandemics, and the other thing is the use of the social network and the trouble brought by misinformation campaigns. So that's a common problem we also have here and in Brazil. So I'm watching carefully. We've had an important experience in fighting these two things, these two viruses, I would say, the COVID-19 and misinformation in Brazil. So I'm paying a lot of attention and I'm trying to learn and to share experiences with people I'll be meeting here.
Well, we're grateful for your presence. We're grateful for your participation. And obviously happy you're here with us. But you said a few things that were very striking and I think important, which is how these elections, both in the United States and Brazil, are being distinguished from previous elections, and how what's distinguishing them is not so much the level of partisanship or polarization, but first of all, the environment they're taking place in, an environment of a pandemic. And then secondly, what you indicated, an atmosphere driven by social media, where disinformation campaigns can be launched against candidates and against political parties. And I know that you, the TSE, have done important work in both of these areas. And I wonder if you might be able to share with us some of the work you've done in regards to securing the electoral polling places to ensure that Brazilian citizens are as safe as they possibly can be from the coronavirus as they go to vote, and then talk a little bit about what you and the TSE have done in regard to social media.
Yeah, certainly, Ambassador, my pleasure. So we've been working since the beginning with science and the best experts we can find. So I took office on May 25th, and the first thing I did was to create a medical committee to monitor the pandemic. And what they they concluded is that we needed to postpone the elections. They were scheduled for October the 4th. And what they told us is that the curve of the disease would start descending late September. And they were right, by the way. So they thought October the 4th would still be too early because the level of the disease would still be very high. So they suggested that we postponed it at least for mid-November, which we did with the help of Congress. After getting this advice from the doctors, I summoned the president of the Senate and the Speaker of the House to the court. We met. I explained to them this view of the doctors, and they took it back to Congress, and they were able to approve a constitutional amendment. As you probably know, or you might know, the date of the elections in Brazil is established in the Constitution. So we needed a constitutional amendment to postpone it. It was actually approved in a record time. The Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate, they showed a great capacity of leadership. And once it was approved, I started dealing with providing safety for the voters. And so we created what we call the sanitary consultancy, and also a committee of statisticians, experts in statistics. So because we needed to know how many hours we needed to extend in the election day. And they did a wonderful work, and they recommended us to extend it for 1 hour and to reserve 3 hours, the first 3 hours for people over 60, which are the group with major risk. So this is what we have done. And the sanitary consultancy, they organized a step-by-step procedure and protocol for safety, and they recommended us to buy a great amount of safety equipment. It was a huge amount, Ambassador. I wouldn't have the time to buy that through the bidding process that you need to adopt in the public administration. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but it's very bureaucratic in Brazil, and probably the 2022 elections would come and the procedure wouldn't be done, wouldn't be finished with all the appeals and everything. So we decided to call for the private sector to provide this equipment. And we were very, very happy that a group of 30 major companies and entities did answer our call, and they provided everything we needed for the protection of the poll workers and of the voters at the election day. We're talking about 9 million masks, 2 million face shields, 2 million hand sanitizers, 1 million liters of hand sanitizer for the voters, floor markers for social distancing, 500,000 pens so that people that don't bring their own pen don't need to exchange objects. So we were very happy. It was a very good surprise how patriotic those companies were, showing up to help us in this vital right for democracy, which is the elections. So these are some of the things we did for what we call for protecting the public health, I would say, Ambassador. And we were concerned at the beginning with voters' turnout, but now we are very excited about, it's a paradox, but we think the turnout this year is going to be higher than in 2018 because people are very mobilized. So these are a few things I can tell we've been doing concerning preserving public health, Ambassador.
You mentioned that you needed a constitutional amendment in order to postpone the elections from October to November. Is that a one-time postponement, or are the elections now permanently set for November as opposed to October?
No, it was a provisional. The Brazilian Constitution has a final part called provisional measures. So it was an amendment to the provisional measures. There was no major change in any permanent part of the Constitution. We even had the temptation, because as you probably know, the inauguration in Brazil is January the 1st. It's an awful day, and everyone wants to change that. And we did consider that, but we decided to focus only in what regarded the pandemic, and leaving anything else for a later date. So it was a one-time amendment, and it's just for now. And yeah, nothing else was changed.
I'm sure you've also noticed during your time here in the United States that the different electoral authorities in charge of managing the voting are facing some very significant health concerns, similar to the ones that you have faced. But they're also facing some significant social issues related to the health concerns. And one of the biggest is the wearing of masks, because we don't want to deny anybody a right to vote, but at the same time, there's been an effort to insist on mask usage in polling places. Is that an issue in Brazil?
It is, and actually we issued a resolution at the Superior Electoral Court that voters can only vote, can only get into the electoral station if they are wearing a mask. And it's not a matter of free will, Ambassador, the way we see it. It's a matter of protecting third parties. So in this case, in other cases, you can say it's my life, and it's my health, and it's my choice. And in many cases, we need to respect that. But in this case, you're dealing with protecting third parties, including the poll workers. So we are going to be very strict, and no one that's not wearing a mask will be allowed. What we did was we got like 3 million extra masks for voters that show up without one. But we have around 150 million voters. So 3 million extra masks is a very little amount. So we are strongly recommending voters to show up at the poll station wearing a mask.
Now, a question which is something that we are following here in the United States right now, and you will probably see it tomorrow in Annapolis in the voting sections where you are going to visit. What are the rules in Brazil in terms of the different groups, the different parties, etc., election day? What are the rules? Can they go to the polling places? Can they distribute electoral material? I know that there are some provisions for that, and those come from they are sort of old, but they may be particularly relevant in the context actually of the U.S. elections also. If you could explain a little bit the mechanics.
Sure. Well, everything is quite different regarding elections here and there. Although we are major democracies, Brazil is the fourth largest democracy in the world. First one is we have India, and Indonesia, the US, and then Brazil. We have, as I said, around 150 million voters. In Brazil, you cannot vote by mail, so we are not facing that problem, although it could have been helpful dealing with the pandemic, as you know. But an American professor, Paulo, asked me why we didn't have the vote by mail, and I said they're gonna, rob the mailman and stuff his bag with fraudulent votes. And this man said to me, "Yeah, but here that's a federal crime. People that did that would be arrested." And I said, well, unfortunately in Brazil, people deviate 70 million reais, and it's very difficult to put these people to jail. So it's just a different system. As you probably know, we have discussed this. One other thing we don't have that was very important here this year, as I know, was the anticipated vote. People that I heard that people, almost 90 million people have voted here already. We don't have this option either. You have to show up at the poll station in Brazil to vote. And being very objective about your question, you cannot campaign in the day of election. One thing we need to decide at the court, because there's no provision about it, is whether or not you can have a candidate's name in on your mask. And I think the court on the voting day. And hopefully we're going to decide this quickly this week or early next week, so that people are aware whether they can or they cannot. So in Brazil, it's a crime to we call it boca de urna. It's a crime. It's not really enforced in a criminal sense, but you're not allowed to campaign on election day. That's very clear in the legislation.
But can, for instance, people working from polling companies do the exit polling research? Can they approach voters after they vote? Is there a minimum distance? Here, I don't know if all over the United States, but here in Maryland, where I am and where I vote, you cannot be, if you're a member of a campaign, if you're not a voter, you cannot be closer than, I think, 50 feet from the polling, from the voting place. How is that in Brazil?
Well, we have this restriction for public safety enforcement agents. So the police needs to be at least 300 feet away from the polling station. That's something I should note. And of course, people who are not directly involved with the election cannot enter the voting station, but we do have polls and in which they talk to people that just voted. And what we are having this year, Paulo, and I think I should mention this, we have a project at the court that I'm ahead of it called Elections of the Future. We made a call for tech companies to propose a new model of digital elections. As you know, in Brazil, we vote using electronic ballots. We have almost 500,000 electronic ballots in Brazil, but it's very expensive to replace them, and they become obsolete very quickly. So we spend like close to 1 billion reais every 2 years to replace the ballots that become obsolete. And I want to fight this cost and eliminate this cost. So we called for major tech companies to present new models of digital elections. And we have 31 companies that showed up, and they will have a demonstration experience, trial experience during this election. It's a simulation. But we have Amazon, Microsoft, IBM, Indra, among others, that have showed up to present new models. And I think that could be a good thing for the world, like if we can develop a system of digital elections. And hopefully we'll be able to announce something new after the elections about this matter.
On this issue, I remember, because I covered this as a journalist, the decision that led to the adoption of the little voting machines that we have, the 5,000 that we have all over the country, and that people learned to deal with and learned about how to use them. They provided for very safe elections. I remember certain elections, for instance, one specific in the state of Paraná, where there was an election for governor some time back, and one candidate got half a percentage point more than the other one, and the one candidate that lost was asked, aren't you going to challenge this? I say, no, I trust the system. And I say, wow, this is quite spectacular. Here in the United States, there is a difficulty with that. People don't like the idea of a pure electronic system. You have to have a sort of a paper proof of your vote. And then this is what goes through machines that read your vote and then starts the counting. One thing that is interesting, it's the third time I vote here in a presidential election. My wife and I, we vote at the Bethesda Chevy Chase High School, where all four kids attended. They had there a drop box. You vote at home. There are elections for president, vice president. We had the congressional election here in the 8th district of Montgomery, of Maryland, which is Montgomery County. And then you go, there are some questions, basically referendum questions about elections of judges, of local judges, etc. You study all that, you vote, and then you drop your vote at those machines, at those boxes, very safe, secure boxes. And the votes are collected twice a day by the authority, which is a board of elections in the state of Maryland. Now, you can always track your voting. We know that our votes were received because you go to the internet and you can see that your vote was received. They put that information in the system before they separate the envelope from your vote. There are two ways of doing it. You put your vote in an envelope and you sign that, and then when they receive it, they separate the two, so you don't know who voted for whom. And it was very interesting too. Was the first time I did it. I knew that my vote was there and it's ready to be counted. And the counting, the apuração, as we say in Brazil, starts at 8 p.m. On Tuesday, when the election, the voting ends. And we should know very quickly here. In Brazil, there is an enormous trust in the system. Do you fear, have there been serious denunciations of corruption in the voting part, the mechanic part of this? Do you think, well, you just mentioned that you asked a number of companies to study sort of making it even more online and using technology to speed up the process. Are there any problems regarding potential interferences in the process?
So regarding the electronic system, Paulo, we live in a world in which people make $1 million transactions using the cell phone. So it doesn't make much sense to discredit the electronic ballot. If you can transfer huge amounts of money, of course you can send your vote safely. It's just a matter of having the proper system. Second thing is about the drop box you mentioned. That wouldn't work in Brazil because according to the Constitution, the vote needs to be secret. And for now, at least, the only way you can make sure the vote was secret is if you go to the polling station. That's one issue with this digital elections I'm willing to introduce. It needs to be safe, efficient, and preserve secrecy. Because in Brazil, in many parts, you have the fear that people would be voting with the boss or the colonel or whoever, sitting behind and telling the voter what to do. So at least for now, I don't anticipate the possibility in Brazil that you would be voting at home and just dropping your vote in a box as at the school, as you mentioned. And as for fraud, there has been, Paulo, no precedent. It has not been evidence whatsoever since 1996, any case of fraud so far. So I want to say I'm not in love with the electronic ballot. I like free and clean elections. So if anyone brings any evidence that something wrong happened, I'll go after it. But it has not happened. Of course, as you know here, as in Brazil, as anywhere else, people that lose elections will say that the system was rigged or fraudulent, but there has been no evidence and the electronic ballots is been around since 1996. So Fernando Henrique Cardoso was reelected with this system. Lula was elected twice with this system. Dilma was elected twice with this system, and Bolsonaro was elected. And I think that no one claims that the outcome was not legitimate. So we don't give much attention to the rhetoric against electronic ballots. However, every year we open the system. Every election year we open the system for hackers from all over the world to try to break the system. And they have never gotten to the core of the system. They found mistakes that we try to fix and improve. So it has worked well so far. So I don't have any reason to doubt the system so far.
I am back.
Sir, the floor is yours.
Well, you've done wonderfully. You've done wonderfully and led us down a very important path. And I just want to take one more step down that path before we turn to social media, which has to do with foreign interference in elections. I'm sure you know that it's a big issue here in the United States and big concern about the way in which foreign authorities have attempted to insert themselves into our electoral process, either by attempting to hack into electoral authorities or by spreading disinformation. Is that a concern of yours in Brazil?
Well, not as much as here. You know, people say, Ambassador, that elections here are so important that everyone in the world should be allowed to vote because it somehow influences what goes on everywhere. We are very concerned about disinformation and misinformation campaigns and hate speech on social media. Quite often, these servers, the computers that disseminate what I don't like the expression fake news, that disseminate misinformation campaigns and lies and hate. Quite often, they are outside of the country, which is also true. But I don't have the feeling that either Russians or Chinese are so interested in the Brazilian elections as they are in the U.S. elections. So the interference from computers that are abroad is a concern, but I don't think any major power is interfering at this point with the Brazilian elections, especially these local elections, I would say. So I think it's a concern you have here, and I know that in the past election in 2016, there were suspicions that wrong things happened, and I know that there's an investigation by Congress, but I don't think anything similar has happened in Brazil so far.
Good. Well, you also did something very innovative. The TSE did agreements of sorts with major social media platforms and technology companies. I wonder if you could describe that for us and what was your thinking about that?
Yeah, well, this is something that really worked out very well, Ambassador. We had in 2018 a major influence by social media and tech companies in the elections. You probably have heard, and I was in a debate with foreign judges, including American judges and a couple American US Supreme Court judges. There's a group that gather at Yale every year. And what they were saying is here, as in other parts of the world, there's no empirical evidence that this changes, that social media changes the result, the outcome of the election. This is something arguable so far. But one thing that the poor use of social media does is to deteriorate, compromise the public debate. Elections, democracy is not made only of votes, but it's also made of exchanging reasons, of public debate, of presenting arguments. And of course, this misinformation and disinformation campaigns do affect the quality of the public debate. So they do harm to democracy. From 2018 up to now, Ambassador, one thing that changed was the position of the tech companies, the social media. In the past years, they were very affirmative in the sense that we don't interfere, we're just the road through which messages go back and forth. We don't want to be censors, and so don't blame us. We're not responsible for what's going on. And I think they had a major problem of image because they started to be associated with this deterioration of democracy and of the public debate. And what I can tell you from 2018 to these days is that there was a major change of heart by the social media, by the tech companies. They have become very cooperative. That has been my experience in Brazil. And so we entered agreements with all of them, with WhatsApp, which is very important in Brazil, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and even TikTok that addresses younger people mostly. And they all agreed to go after what's called coordinated, unauthentic behavior. So instead of controlling the content, we are controlling this behavior that involves false profiles or the use of bots and the massive forwarding of unsolicited messages. So they all have entered agreements with us, especially with WhatsApp. That's very important in Brazil, Paulo, as you probably know. One survey found out that 70% of the Brazilian population has WhatsApp as its only source of information. So we were very careful in dealing with WhatsApp, and we entered some special agreements with them, two very special agreements. One is we created a chatbot that we can send messages to all users that register. So we have a direct communications with everyone that has a WhatsApp account. And the other one was a direct communication. We have a form online at the Electoral Justice site in which anyone can communicate that is receiving unsolicited messages, campaign messages, and we immediately send them to WhatsApp and they check where it's coming from, and they have banned over 200 accounts upon our, they have banned thousands of accounts, but on our request, over 200 accounts have been banned for forwarding illegal, unsolicited message, political messages, especially when it's against the system, the electoral system or the electoral courts. So the first thing we did to fight misinformation was to enter this agreement with the social media. And Paulo, we also entered an agreement with all 9 fact-checking agencies in Brazil. We created a WhatsApp group, and whenever we see a information that we have reasons to doubt its authenticity, we send it in our group, and the fact-checking agencies immediately check if it's true or not. And the outcome, the conclusion goes to their site. And we have a page in the electoral justice site called Fato ou Boato, fact or rumor, in which we provide accurate information. And we entered a deal without phone companies so that everyone can access our page without paying. It's called zero rating. So without any expense or deduction from your package, you can access this page and check if information is true. So we prepared for a war, and I think we are winning so far. I don't like to celebrate things before they are over, but so far misinformation has been very unimportant in this election compared to what happened before. And so what we did, I think we got rid or we prevented what we call the useful innocents, people that would forward fake news, just without knowing or for not being conscious. I think we scare the amateurs and the professionals, the digital militias that have a hierarchy and are funded. We are paying very much attention to them, and a couple of them we have dismantled with the federal police and with great publicity. So I think we reduced disinformation campaigns to a minimum in these elections, fortunately.
Okay, before I ask Ambassador Shannon to ask a final question or give us his concluding remarks, I would like to ask you two questions. One, when you go to Annapolis tomorrow to observe elections in what I think 5 or 6 precincts, what are you going to observe? What are you interested in? The second thing in Brazil, this election in Brazil, the municipal election is our midterm election of sorts, because it helps kind of organize the panorama for the elections, the general and presidential elections that come 2 years later. Anything that you can say about this aspect of the municipal elections in Brazil that would be, any remarks that you can make about this could be very useful. And once you finish your answer, I would ask Ambassador Shannon to help us conclude the remarks. We are almost at the time. Yes, we are at the time we budgeted for this. I know that both of you are very busy people, and but if you could answer the two questions I posed, thank you very much.
Okay. Paulo, one thing is I think that people sometimes downplay local elections in Brazil. And one thing we are emphasizing is that people actually, they live in the municipalities. They don't live in the federal government. They don't live in the states. They live in where the local government is responsible for taking care of things. And in Brazil, as you might know, the local government, the municipal government is responsible for very important things like, for example, fundamental education. The counties are in charge of that. And now with the new law, they have an important role in basic sanitation, which is a major public policy that needs to be expanded in Brazil, as I'm sure you would agree. And also primary health care is the responsibility of local governments. So since I started, overseeing the elections, I've been trying to make sure that people are aware of the importance of these elections, not only for preparing for the presidential elections, because mayors play an important role in the campaigns, as you probably know, but besides that, they have an intrinsic role of their own, which is running business, local business in these areas, which is very important. So tomorrow in Annapolis, first, of course, it's always an experience for someone that likes. I'm not only a judge. I'm a law professor. I like to think the world and my country. So I want to see in person the behavior of people. I want to see the sanitary measures that have been taken just to make sure that there's something else we can do in Brazil besides what we have been doing. So I am an observer, and I'm sure I'm going to profit from the experience of seeing how things go in a democracy like the US, American democracy, and especially in this polarized environment. It's an intellectual, maybe an anthropological experience to be here at this moment. So I'm going to be watching for sanitary purposes and for, I would say, also for enlightening me about how things work. And of course, I can always give testimony of what happened and how I saw it. So I'm, as you probably know, I'm a law professor that I am in the international debate circuit, and it's material for discussion and for debate.
Well, Ambassador Shannon, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Paulo, and I appreciate the patience that you have all shown. But Mr. Minister, let me thank you for your extraordinary presentation today. It's been hugely helpful to us, and we're very grateful for it. As two great democracies trying to understand our way forward in a world, as you noted, which is increasingly polarized and protagonistic and antagonistic, one of the challenges that people such as yourself and other electoral officials face is how to make elections work in this kind of environment. As our societies work towards a larger consensus about what our purpose in the world happens to be. And so I congratulate you for the tremendous commitment that you have made to Brazil's democracy and to the well-functioning of its electoral system. We're happy you're here in the United States to watch our own system. I think it will work well over the next several days. This is my hope. This is my aspiration and ambition. And I believe that as we look ahead, how the United States and Brazil can compare and contrast our experiences and take best practices from each other will be hugely helpful. So you've done us an enormous service, and we're very grateful for it. So again, thank you very much. I wish you well tomorrow, and I wish you well in November with the municipal elections.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Paulo, again, for the invitation, Ambassador, for taking the time to share some thoughts with me. Of course, you were 7 years in Brazil, so that was time enough for you to learn a lot about the country and understand the country. And I hope I can come back and talk to you again. It's always interesting to discuss Brazil with someone that sees it from outside, but has the experience of having lived there. So I do look forward to meeting you in person as soon as the pandemic will allow us. And what I'm pretty sure is no matter who wins tomorrow, Brazil and the US have strong relations. Of course, the agenda might change a little bit, but we are, close countries, and we have trade ties, we have academic ties. I myself have academic ties with the US, which is an honor for me. So no matter what happens tomorrow, of course, we might have our own preferences, but I cannot reveal. You could, but I can't. But whatever happens, I think our countries will continue with this friendly relationship and trying to build a better future together. So thank you very much. It was great spending some time with you and learning and trying to help the discussion in some way. Paulo, many thanks to all our friends at the Brazil Institutes and to Ricardo Zuniga also. Thank you.
Yes, I would like to add thanks to Anya Prusa, the senior associate of the Brazil Institute, to Annelise Gilbert, who is the program assistant, and to our dear Tracy Fitzgerald that made all this possible technologically, obviously, to Ambassador Shannon. And good luck to all involved in the efforts here and in Brazil. As Ambassador Shannon said, these are two vibrant democracies, and if elections, are well executed in our countries, I think democracy strengthens all over this continent. I would say, given the size of Brazil and the United States, benefits the world. Thank you very much on behalf of the Brazil Institute and the Wilson Center, and we'll be with you next time, either here in Washington or in Brazil. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.